Dive in the deep end, it's time to defend your movie.
Hello, film buffs. Welcome to this week's episode of Defending Your Movie. I am your host, Jeremy Meyer. So this week is going to be a little different. We are not actually going to talk about a movie today. This is actually an episode that I had recorded for my last podcast. It was actually up in the air of maybe being my last episode, but it was one of those things where, like, this is something we had planned to sit down and do for a long time and kind of just never got around to it. And then I literally did it when I had the idea for the inception of this show. And it was actually technically the first episode I had recorded, since I recorded it for my last podcast. But I decided to just hang on to it, and then was going to release it for this show. And it kind of just kept getting pushed off, but it can be pushed off no longer. Now is the time to release it. So this week I am sitting down with a friend of mine named Brandon Prosek. He is part of the Entertainment Buffet, whose YouTube channel you can often find our videos posted on. This is actually where the episodes for this show post on YouTube, is on the Entertainment Buffet YouTube channel. But Brandon is a friend of mine. He became a friend through my original podcast, and he actually came on and guested on the podcast. And he's actually going to, aside from this episode, is going to guest on this podcast as well, where we will actually talk about a movie. We already have a movie picked out. We just haven't gotten around to it yet. But this is actually a retrospective that we wanted to do 4 years ago or 5 years ago. We say it exactly when in the show. Brandon wrote a play called How Does That Make You Feel? And they performed it here in Chicago. It was like a full-on production. I took my wife out to see it. We had a date night, and it was awesome. It was hilarious. It was great. I was incredibly proud and incredibly jealous of my friend who made this awesome thing. You know, he had an idea, and he put it in motion, and he made it happen, which is the dream, you know? So I was super excited for him. And we always talked about, like, oh, you know, it'd be fun to sit down in like a few months or whatever and just kind of do a retrospective on the show. And then a few months turned into 4 years, and we finally got to do it. So we're going to sit down and we're just going to talk about the writing, the casting, the inception. We break this whole thing down. And if you actually want to watch the play, he actually has it recorded from the theater and posted on YouTube. And it's a 2 parts, and the links will be in the show notes. I highly recommend watching the play before listening to the episode. I mean, you don't have to, you know, you can still get the gist of it, but honestly, the show's really good and really funny. So I honestly just recommend giving it a watch beforehand and then come and listen to the episode. You know, it's a nice little multimedia experience. So, you know, the links for that will be in the show notes. But we're going to sit down and talk about Brandon's play, How Does That Make You Feel? Before we do that, got to get the plugs out of the way. As always, you can follow us on social media at Defending Movie on Twitter and Instagram. You can find our Patreon, patreon.com/defendingmovie, and our merch store at belowthecollar.com/defendingyourmovie. And don't forget, we have our partnership with thecrypticcloset.com. If you go to there and, you know, pick out your awesome horror-themed merchandise, you can use promo code DEFEND and get 21% off your complete order. So be sure to do that too. Cryptic Closet has a lot of really great designs. But yeah, so without further ado, let's get into this retrospective with Brandon Prosek on his play, How Does That Make You Feel? So, how many years ago was this now?
So, the script, like the first idea, I started writing in September of 2016, and then the actual production when we were on stage for showings was August of 2017. So it was all from idea to stage was almost a year exactly.
It's crazy that it's been 4 years already.
Yeah. Trust me. Whenever like the 1 year comes around, and like, you know, how social media does the, you know, X amount of year ago, you posted this, you know, it always, it feels so long ago, but also it's like, oh my God, it's that long ago at the same time.
Yeah, it's really crazy because like I met you probably around 2016, I would say.
Yeah.
And I think we met just through the podcast. So, like, you had reached out to me, and then we started talking, and then I invited you on the podcast, and then you invited me to the show. And I just want to thank you for that because it was a really nice date night for me and my wife. Like, she's someone who doesn't like to go out a lot, especially to the city, just because she has like pretty intense anxiety. So, like, going out for her is always kind of a big deal. But we both went and had like a lot of fun. Like, she really loved it. I really loved it. So, as a fan, thank you for putting out this great show.
No, I mean, as someone who's produced live entertainment, thank you for coming and supporting live entertainment. Because, like, the one thing that's so hard from the producing aspect is not only like the marketing thing, and obviously you can do what you can to invite the people but that's also a thing, that an entire thing of its own is like how many of the people will actually show or actually be available to show. And the fact that you guys came, supported, and you had fun, then that means the world to me. I hoped people would get something out of it and at least stick in their heads a little bit, even if it's just like, oh man, that was really weird, that was goofy, that was fun, that was that's always the goal with writing, is to hopefully stick with people in some way.
Yeah, and we don't have to, you don't have to answer these questions if some of them are a little too behind the scenes or too personal, but like how did it do, like your overall like run? Like, were you happy with like the experience and like the crowds and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I mean, from the production standpoint, well, I guess one thing I should say is this was my first play, if you don't count the 5th grade play when I had one line in Annie. This was my first play in any role, and I was the writer of the play, and then I produced it. Did not direct.
Which I learned that today. I always just assumed you directed it. I didn't see that there was a when I watched the YouTube version, I didn't see that there was a director on there.
Yeah, so her name is Nora Wolf. She is brilliant and wildly multi-talented. She is someone who has a huge theater background, both for performing, whether it's musicals or plays. She also has done like makeup and directing, producing. So she's like done everything. So when I was trying to I knew when I like was writing it, I was like, I need someone with theater background to direct it. And also, like, my general goal with like writing, like I have a background with video and film and whatnot, directing, but like it's not my favorite thing. My favorite thing is like the writing and like bringing the thing to life. But like I like when other people that are more talented in that role to kind of come in and not only bring it to life, but when they understand the thing, but also put something of their own into it. And I think Nora just like got exactly what I was going for. And like there was many nights of talking about it, many days of texting about it, all with like pre-production and casting and so forth, rehearsals. Like she just got it. And so like I have to owe most of the success of the play to her direction, and also just helping me produce a play when I had no background in it at all. I never acted in one, produced one. It was also the first play I wrote. So I had no background in it, and we also, we were going based on like crowdfunding. We did an Indiegogo for the production budget, and also I had some money, personal money saved from my production company, Entertainment Buffet, to like put into it, and yeah, I mean, as far as like how I am with it, it is one of the greatest things I think I've done with my life so far. Obviously I'm 29, so I hope that wasn't my peak.
Oh, the sky is the limit, sir.
Yeah, I'm so happy with it, because like just the crazy thought that literally middle of August 2016, I got just the idea and the title, and then August of 2017 there was crowds. And then the great thing that I love about how the show that you saw was it was pretty much a sold out show. So there was about 65 people in a 70 seat theater. And also that night will always have a special place in my heart because it felt like that crowd, you guys in that crowd, just enjoyed. It felt like every joke in there.
Yeah, I do remember the crowd being really into it. Like it, like you said, to me it seemed like a full house. If there might have been some empty seats, I didn't notice, but everybody seemed to just vibe with it. They were getting it. Because it's some dark humor and stuff, not always for everybody, but I think everybody there kind of must have knew what they were getting into. You know, my wife loved it, I loved it, and it made it more of a fun experience. Like even hearing the chatter in between stuff, just like a lot of positive comments.
Yeah, and I apologize ahead of time if at any point during this podcast I just get like emotional because like this piece means a lot to me. And that night, that was our third show. So what we did was we booked that venue, that theater and that venue. It was at Stage 773 in Chicago for 2 weekends. We had it. We decided to do like basically how that would work out with the 2 weekends with the deal is you can do 5 shows in a week. And like that was so that was a big thing that was up for debate between me and the director was like, when do we do the shows? When do you think we will have more audience? Because like I don't have experience. Like I've been to plays, but I didn't have and I had produced some like comedy shows, but never like theater. So I was just like, well, when do people go to plays? Because like, you know, I was at the time in like my mid 20s. I was I guess I would have been 20. It was 4 years ago. I was 25 at the time. So it's like I don't mind going out during the week, but like what do other paying people do? You know, so what we are on the fence between possibilities. So what we decided to do is the show would be Thursdays through Sundays. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Saturday we would do 2 shows. We would do like a 7 o'clock and then like I think like a 9 or 10 o'clock show. I'd have to look at like the old poster again. Cause she said, oh, late shows are a big thing. A lot of people go out late on Saturday. She's like, people go to dinner and then they go to catch a late show. She's like, also there's like younger people who work till like 8, 9 o'clock and then they catch a show after. And I was like, okay, if you say so. And then we also Sunday, we did more of a matinee style, like 3 o'clock show. So it was 2 weekends, 5 shows in that schedule. It was like, middle to end of August. Overall, you know, I'm very happy with like the turnout considering, like I said, this is an original piece. It's a very dark piece and dark comedy. I also, you know, we had minimal marketing experience. So, you know, we obviously had tried to have the cast and crew and, you know, they did a good job, like bringing out family, friends, and then just telling people. But then like, there'd also just be like random people that when I'm like checking them in, cause we had like a little like ticket scanner thing at Stage 773. I was like checking people in and I would try to ask people here and there when it wasn't too busy. Like, do you mind if I ask how you found the show? And someone was like, well, we just wanted to go out and we live by a Stage 773. So we looked at the different options that were available and then we thought this idea looked interesting, you know, and I was just
people
like,
nearby.
Yeah. Which like, who's to say how many that is? So like the one struggle we did have with that, and it's probably one of my bigger lessons. I won't say regrets. Let's just say lessons from the whole experience was the late show thing did not pan out like we expected. The late shows were the smallest turnouts, that late Saturday show. I think one show we had like 10 people or less. And then like another one, it was probably, probably both those were about the same. But, and like, sure, it's great. We have 10, 12 people, but like when you have a 60 seat thing, 10, 12 people with a show that can be anywhere from like an hour 40 to out, like little under 2 hours, depending on like intermission and stuff. It's it's gonna be real late,
Yeah.
which, like, if you're a night owl, it probably doesn't matter, but like, you're in a dark room, there's not as many people, like laughter isn't as contagious when there's less people in the room and everyone's of course spread out. So like I would have probably chosen to maybe stretch one on a Wednesday, or maybe do a matinee Saturday and then a Saturday night, but it's one of those things, lesson learned with that. But overall, like, the Thursday, Friday, early Saturday showings, we all had pretty decent crowds. Obviously, there's always the anxiety right before, like, what is anyone going to show up? Well, and the biggest thing that I learned that was so frustrating is, so I don't know how you are, but I'm the type of person that, like, if I decide I'm going to a show, I like buying the ticket, like either online or over the phone, like ahead of time.
Yeah.
But how many people didn't do that? And so, like, I would always check in with 773, like, how many tickets sold, and they'd be like, oh, 10. I'm like, fuck, and oh, can I swear? I can't remember.
Oh yeah, no, you're fine.
So I was like, shit, only 10 people. But then all of a sudden walk-ups would have, and then all of a sudden we'd get like 35, 40 when the show actually started. Like, that was the total. It's like, oh, this many people get it last minute, and some within 5 to 10 minutes of the show starting, So that is one thing that was very, like, a huge, like, lesson as far as, like, okay, people aren't going to buy stuff ahead of time.
Yeah.
And you got to wait to the last minute. And
I used to not. I used to be a person who would be a walk-up person, and then the first time I did it, I was like, oh, why wasn't I always doing this?
Yeah. So, I mean, overall, I would say, like, if I think once I did the math, I think attendance-wise, out of like the 10 shows, we sold tickets for, it probably would have averaged out to about half or a little over half, which, that means out of like I guess that'd be 600 possible attendees, we were probably in like the 300 range, which, like, not bad, I think, considering like I said, independent show, unheard of idea, no one in the cast is famous,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm happy with it. I learned a lot. It was a lot of fun. I think just like the producer in me, and even I would learn for like the show I did the following year, is just how much goes into the producing aspect of it. It's like you can have, and this goes for like, movies, TV. It's like you can have a show or a thing that is fun and maybe people like, but like getting people to actually see it is the real difficult part.
Yeah. So let's kind of take it back to the beginning here.
Mm-hmm.
You said this was your first play. So what kind of stirred this on, and was it always a play originally, or did you just eventually decide that was the best way to tell the story?
So yeah, combination of things. First being my writing before this idea was even a thought in my head. I am very dialogue heavy. And I also don't like changing the scenery or having as much action. I love a lot of talking, and like the funny thing is the funny thing is, like, I don't have a lot of experience even going to theater, because like my parents didn't really take me to plays or musicals growing up. I think
me neither. Most of mine are through school.
Yeah, same. So it wasn't really their thing. And then in college, I tried to see some, and I just, like, that'd be a regret, is like, I wished, especially going to Columbia and Chicago, like seeing more plays. Because what happened is, once I started seeing plays around probably that year, there was one I saw, it probably would have been summer 2016. It was a one that was very much like my idea would be, which was, it was like farcical, like Clue, and their show was very much like there's a play / movie called Noises Off. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I have not.
So that one it's very farcical, but it's actually like a play about a play. And so you watch like the actors kind of like rehearsing another play, and like it's really like the same few scenes, but you see it like 3 different ways. Like one is in front of stage, one is backstage, and then one is like actual show night.
Yeah.
And so like seeing this show, and it was actually at Corn production / Conservatory in Chicago. Seeing this show, I was like, man, this is very dialogue heavy, and like, so it kind of stirring in my mind that's like, maybe I should I think I could. Like, it seemed a little cocky in my head. I was like, I think I could do that. But like, I had written some pilots, written some features, and like, I'd always had so much dialogue and stuff. And so then I started like thinking about it. And also, I generally love like movies where there's either like one or very minimal locations. Like, I loved, especially in and just out of college, I loved like Reservoir Dogs, which like,
yeah, I was gonna say this all reminds me of how like Tarantino and Kevin Smith affected everybody our age.
Which like, I hadn't even seen Kevin Smith stuff. I had heard that about him, but yeah, Reservoir Dogs, I loved how it was very minimal scenes, but it was a lot of talking. And so like, I think all these things were kind of mixing around in my head. And then when I finally got the actual idea for the premise, I realized that yes, it could probably pull off as a feature, but because I want to do the gimmick of not only one location, but one evening, I'm like, this makes most sense as a play.
Yeah. And oh God, I just had a question. What was it? So you getting the original idea, because there's a lot going on in this story. You have how many, like 6-7 characters all kind of telling their own stories. Like, what is like the first little nugget of story that kind of pops in your head for this?
Yeah, so it's really I think it's such a stupid way on how I got this idea. And the reason I'll always remember that it was August of 2016 is like, okay, so August of 2016, there was 2 movies that came out, and there was a meme online because someone like marquees on a movie theater, when they put up like what's showing that weekend. Yeah. Someone mixed 2 titles.
I think I know exactly what you're gonna say.
So 2 movies that came out that summer, for those who don't know, what came out August 2016 was Suicide Squad and Sausage Party. Okay. And so there was a meme that someone like swapped them, and it was Sausage Squad and Suicide Party. And I literally saw the phrase Suicide Party and said, now what would that look like?
That's all it takes, though.
That's like, all it took. So, and then 3 weeks later, I had
something like that.
Yeah, and then 3 weeks later, I had 120 pages somehow. It was just like,
that's amazing.
That's all it takes sometimes for writers, and I'm sure other people, like, whether it's like, you think of a riff for like a song or whatever it may be, and then like you get the juices flowing, and then you just like keep going with them and just get everything down, and then you can always like fix it later. And so that was the original title of the play, but I was like, I can't actually call it that because it's a very harsh title, Suicide Party. But like draft 1 of this idea, which eventually was called How Does It Make You Feel, was Suicide Party.
A much classier title.
Yeah, which like that title didn't come until like maybe like end of 2016, beginning of 2017. Like I was a few drafts in, and then someone who was originally in talks to be a director potentially said like, you should do, because it's like based around like therapy, you should do like, and how does that make you feel? But then like that was just like one too many words, and so we just topped it off to How Does That Make You Feel?
Yeah, it's a really good title, and it's catchy.
Yeah, I'm glad, because like I am so bad with titles.
So am I. They're the worst.
The way I always look at it with titles is like, if I don't get it right away, I need someone else to help me get it. Like I can't. It's like either one of the first things I get, or it's gonna take forever.
Every single one of my titles is a working title for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my first like full script idea was a feature film, and that was like when I was like 18 in like 2010. Still doesn't have a title, you know what I mean? Like, but then like I have other ideas where like you get it right away. and it just like clicks. And so I'm like so glad that someone else said that, because like I couldn't figure it out for months. Like when I think it was probably at draft like 3 by that point, and then he said it, and I was like, hell yeah, that is it.
Yeah.
Like once you know when it comes to titles.
So to kind of branch off that, just a question I need to ask. I assume Rusty was the most fun character to write for.
Yeah, Rusty, which and one thing, the actor Vic Kuligowski, and if you watch the YouTube of like that show, everyone said how he was like their favorite. Yeah. And like he killed it. And he's one of those actors, like when it comes to like my weird, sometimes rapid fire, wordy, alliteration based, I make up words. It is something that like whenever I did like sketches and whatnot, it's like you can't teach actors to like read lines a certain way. Like they just either get it or they don't. I've found in like my experience doing like film sketches, live stuff, and he just got the dialogue, and then he just found like the way he was going to play the character, and was just, I knew, and we were curious because we knew he was going to be a hard role to cast. Yeah. And like my director knew him. He actually, it's like I went to college with him at Columbia, and we just didn't know each other. And she's like, I really think he should be like a front runner. But like in my head, I had like a certain visual of like what Rusty looked like. But then that's where I'm like, you know what? I told myself like, it doesn't matter what they look like. It's like, who is the person that's going to do the best performance? And so he ended up getting casted. And yeah, so like Rusty was a character that this is a dynamic I love doing in sketches, in anything. What I like to call it is incompetence with the utmost confidence. It's a thing I like to do where someone is like so stupid and they'll say something wrong, but they just it's totally oblivious to them that they're wrong, and they're yeah. For example, like if I was a person that just believed that the sky was purple and not blue, and I just like, yeah, it's purple. Like, are you an idiot? Like, I just
completely confident in his stupidity.
Yeah, and so like I could literally just like he could say in my eyes like anything. He was just a character that I think has a lot of like innocence, and he had no like real parental figures, and so he was really raised on television, and he's just
a grown-up child.
He's a grown-up child, exactly. And so that's why like he was a person that and it was one of those things I didn't realize until like I was reading and then especially watching. So the weird thing too, I went to all 10 showings of the show because I'm like, well, I'm only doing 10 showings, and who knows if I ever do another play again. Like I'm not going to miss, a moment that could happen. And I realized how many sex jokes were in this play. and it was something that I since the show, I realized in a future draft, I kind of tried to trim some, because what I realized would happen is a lot of this play was written in 10 to 12 page chunks. And if say you do a sex joke or two in 110 pages, and then a sex joke here, and then I like wrote it over, like I said, like a 2-3 week period. It doesn't seem like much when you're doing it in chunks, but then all of a sudden when it comes to watching it fully through, I'm like, there's a lot of sex jokes in here.
But there is also a character who is almost entirely based around sex jokes.
Yeah, so and that's why it's like Rusty could say anything, especially like the sex jokes. We even had to censor his character and some things I wanted him to say. And
I think there is a moment that pulls that all together, though, at the end when Chloe tells him, like, hey, maybe treat me like a person.
Yeah, and so that's the other thing is the Chloe character. They're the most vulgar, ridiculous characters, and He's a man child, and then Chloe, the way I put it, I know there's probably a more clinical term, but I like to say a sexaholic. And it's not necessarily just like, oh, she's a quote unquote like slut, you know, however you use that term or whatever. It's like, no, she just is struggling with depression, and her vice, you know, some people turn to drugs or drinking or pills or whatever it may be. And it's like she turned to sex, and was very open, confident, and blatant about it, and like just didn't give a fuck. And
but there is
those two characters.
Yeah, but there is like the duality of each character of so. And one thing I like is all the scenes where he brings them in for their therapy sessions is like all the scenes of them together, they're saying this wild and crazy shit and it's funny, but then things get dark and serious in their sessions. And, you know, her session in particular, where she talks about like, hey, I did all of this stuff and I know it's horrible, but I am just trying to feel something. And I don't know if you ever saw the Michael Fassbender movie Shame, but it is also a movie.
But I've heard it's good.
It's very good. And it's a movie where he is a sex addict, and it shows very well how it just controls his life. And it's just something that's always in the foreground. He's never talking about it, but you're just witnessing it firsthand.
Yeah. And so this is probably too much information, but if you know me, or if you heard my stand up, I could be just very open. I realized later, like my own like therapizing myself, like with this whole play was I was in a 5-year at the time, and it was actually ending. I was separated when the show finally came, but I was in a 5-year like sexless relationship. And I realized that I started writing a lot of comedy with a lot of sex in it, and just wanted people that could say anything and do anything and be like as ridiculous as possible, because it was just an escape from like my own world. And also like the play is very dark comedy based, and like I always my inspiration for like my favorite kind of dark comedies, I like to tell people, I was like, this is kind of like a mashing of like Clue and like the movie In Bruges. And
two wonderful films,
because they're both like Clue is more like straight up comedy, but it's just like comedic because like people are like dying and they're not like treating it seriously. It's farcical. But like In Bruges is, I think Martin McDonagh, that playwright and filmmaker, gets the thing, which is what I wanted to do with dark comedy is, and why I think I tend to just call a lot of my stuff that is because I don't want to be my work to be classified as just a comedy or just a drama. Because I feel like if you really look at a lot of media, that's kind of how people are like, oh, is it a comedy or a tragedy? Is it a comedy or drama? Is it best comedy, best drama? You know what I mean? Like we split things, and even how we formatted things is like comedy is usually 30 minutes. Drama is usually 45 to an hour. Comedy movies are standard 90 minutes, you know, whereas like dramas and so forth are 2 hours. So it's like, we're very much like, it's one or the other. And I don't like that, because the way I realized and started saying it later is like, life isn't like that. You know, I like how one moment something could be like making you cry, and then something else a moment later can make you crying out of laughter. And so like an example, if anyone is just listening to this but hasn't watched the show, if you're curious when we keep saying like dark, here's an example. And this actually happened in 2016 when I was writing this. So at the time, my grandma was dying. And so there were days where she was in a hospital, in and out of the hospital. And we would try to just like rotate staying with her so she wasn't alone. And I was there once, and when she was sleeping, I'd be actually writing this play. And when she was awake, I'd be spending time with her. And so she said something, and also I learned a lesson about something when it comes to hospitals. So like I was kind of transitioning, like my aunt was there, and she was like, all right, so here's the deal, da, 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 da. And she like points to this whiteboard at the side of the room. She's like, that says DNR. Do you know what that means? And I said, no. They're like, that means do not resuscitate. You know, she's like in her 80s. And that means if something starts happening like you can call for help, but like they're not supposed, she just wants to go. And so like I was sitting with that moment because I knew that I was like, oh my God, I could literally like watch my grandma die. And then picture my grandmother was like 4'10", she's like this little woman, and she just turns to me and she goes, yeah, if I'm done, I'm done. And she kind of waves her hand, like very dismissive.
Yeah.
And like it made me laugh because I'm like, Grandma, you're talking about your own death here.
Yeah, my wife's grandmother, she was like 102 when she finally passed like 2 or 3 years ago, and she was like that when she was like 80, and she went on to be like 102. So every holiday with her was just, I can't wait until I'm gone. All my friends are dead anyway.
Yeah, so like that moment of like, if I'm gone, I'm gone, and it's like an uncomfortable like burst of like laughter from your gut, like that is the tone and like what I was going for with not only this but a lot of my work now, because I feel it's a type of laughter it's dark comedy can very easily be turned into like just like for shock value. Like I'm just gonna out of nowhere like 9/11 joke, and it's like you can maybe laugh at it, or it's just like, yeah, but that was very random. So like I tried to be also tasteful because I'm talking about like suicide and death and therapy and all these things, and I was like, you know what, but I want to joke about all these things because I think everyone just kind of, and in society, like we shove a lot of these subjects, they're stigmatized and we shove them aside and we don't talk about it. And that's why like so many people like don't get help. They don't go to therapy because they think it's weird. They think who else would no one actually does that. I'm not crazy, or like whatever the stigmas are. And or like, oh, I don't have a real problem. Like I could be worse, so many different things about like, and I wanted it. It's like, no, I want to talk about a lot of these things in a serious way, but also joke about them because we need to just like break these stigmas and bring the conversations to like, I wish, for example, like if someone didn't want to go to something, like they invited to an event, you could actually, and you could probably say this with certain people you're comfortable with, but I wish you could say like, I my depression's really high today and I just really don't want to leave the house. I'm okay, but I just don't want to go out. I wish you could say that. Some friends or family you can, but for the most part, you can't say that. You have to say like, oh, I got a stomach thing. Yeah, I'm busy. I got a stomach thing. Or, my dog's not feeling well. Whatever you have to come up with an excuse. And it's like, that's one thing I was hoping with my show is like, we could joke about it. We could laugh about it, but we could also think about it and talk about it.
Yeah, I am very adamant about not stigmatizing mental health or therapy, as like that is stuff that is very close in my personal life that, I have people in my life that deal with stuff like that. And I'm always telling them like, you don't like, they don't want to talk to me about it because they think it's a burden. And I'm like, you're not a burden. Like, don't feel that way. Like you can talk about this. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And this was actually something that, the reason why this subject matter became so passionate to me is because it was really like the year or two before that I generally started learning more about like actual depression and anxiety and so forth. And like I had tried a couple kind of like free counselor therapy things in college, but I never truly been to therapy before. And actually around,
and it's a process too. You need to try different doctors and find the right one that vibes with you and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah, so I actually started going to therapy around summer 2016. And the reason why, like, I'll always say that this work saved my life twice is because like 2016 was real rough for me, and not for the reason we're all thinking, like that didn't help.
Didn't help August. With the election. We didn't think that was gonna even happen.
Yeah, exactly. So at that time I was in a failing marriage, and my wife at the time was depressed. A lot of my 2 or 3 of my close best friends were depressed. And I was at a very, very toxic job at US Bank that I hated, that gave me just anxiety and made me just loathe for like barely above minimum wage.
Man, I know a lot of people that work at banks that say the same thing.
Yeah, they're not great.
One of my coworkers came to us from a bank and sounded exactly the same.
Yeah, I've worked in banking in 3 years, and yeah, it definitely it all depends on your coworkers, but like when you have bad coworkers, but also whatever. Anyway, customer service garbage and so forth. So toxic job, and so the issue that I had and what you actually brought up is like I felt like a burden because I was like, well, everyone else is sad around me. I don't want to bother anyone with this. I don't want to, because they have their own stuff going on, and clearly their stuff, like in my own head, I just rationalize that their stuff must be worse than mine, and therefore like I don't deserve to bring up my stuff. And so I finally realized I was like, I should go to therapy because and this sounds like a sponsor for therapy, but like I'm just such a positive advocate for it, because what I realized, I was like, well, a therapist is a third party that is completely there for you. And when you find the right one, and luckily I found the right one after a couple, I found her, and I'm still actually seeing her 4 or 5 years later.
That's great.
Yeah. And I feel like I've grown in many different ways, both on like my own and thanks to her. Just having someone that you can always go to, that like you're not feeling like a bother, because it's like that's their job, that's what you're paying them for. So it's a huge thing, and it's also probably why when I got this idea, I had started experiencing therapy on my own, and so that was like a big influence, because it was already helping after only like probably a few months in at the time when I started writing this. And then over the course of from when it was written in like August, September 2016 to like when it was made in August 2017, I was in therapy for that entire year and like grown a lot. And then why this means so much to me is like July 2017, I separated from my wife. So we were in rehearsals getting ready the next month to put the show on. And luckily rehearsals and getting the show up helped distract me, because first writing the script helped distract me, had me something productive that I felt good working on. It could be like just my thing that I'll eventually share with people. And then like it was actually happening. People like the script. These actors have agreed to be in it for very little money. We've raised money for it. Then in 2017, you know, I got a director. It's like things are looking good, even though, you know, I was then moved back in with my folks. And I literally, so the show you went to, that third showing that Saturday, so I was there, and then I obviously stayed for the late show that Saturday as well. That night, I literally had the light bulb moment that I for sure wanted to pull the trigger on divorcing my toxic ex-wife. Like it was like literally that night of that showing. It clicked because I had a lot of people like yourself and friends and family that came to the show that were so supportive. Yeah. I realized I like wasn't alone, and there were people that cared about me, and like I had a very toxic relationship with her, and she saw the show the night before, and she just sitting next to her, I could tell she was just like, I'm just doing this thing because he like wants me here. It's like, no, there are people here that are enjoying themselves, that are having fun, that came here because they want to support it, but now they're like, hey, it's actually fun, you know, like, because you can go to someone's creative work and it happens where it may not be the best thing in the world.
But we support.
Exactly. But luckily everyone had fun and they felt like it was worth, you know, like the $13-15 or whatever it may have been. I think that's what it was. And so I had that light bulb moment. So like I said, this show like saved my life. The story helped through a very, very dark time when I was writing it. And then also like dark / you know, kind of turning point of like, yes, I'm not only separating, I want to leave her. I want to get out of this toxic relationship and I want to move on. And now, you know, 4 or 5 years later, I'm so happy I made that decision. For the last 2 years, I've been in a wildly, wildly healthy relationship. And so like, that's why I could literally sit here and give you just like 3 hours of me talking about the show, because it personal and also just like creatively means a lot to me.
I mean, that's great news, and it's like a great story. And like our art comes from us, and it's interesting to see how it affects other people. And it's kind of nice to, I mean, this sounds weird talking about in the case of your divorce, but kind of nice to know I played a part in that. But to know that it was the night that like helped you improve your life, because that's what it's all about. And I mean, it's even rooted in this story of, in particular with Jerry. Like, Jerry sees the best in these people and is trying to help them.
Yeah. And so, like, I think for me, just from like a personal standpoint, you like that crowd and like everyone who I got to talk to after the show, who like was, so kind about it and whatnot. It just clicked. And also, like, and this is going to sound very like selfish, because like obviously I did not do the show alone. I had an amazing director, a lot of support.
Of talent.
Yeah, a lot of talent from the cast crew, support from the Indiegogo supporters, my folks, everyone who helped out, on top of the people who actually paid to come see it. But like, and this is it, and I don't mean this to sound like bitter and like lash out at her in any way, because it's like I've moved on. But like, I think something clicked in me. I'm like, she had zero help in this, and it's like I had all these amazing people around me that believed in my idea and helped me make it a reality. And like, all she did was come and show up and
minimum
and begrudgingly watch the show. And like, she, no joke, was like, she was upset because there was like traffic, which, guys, if you're not from Chicago,
oh my God, it's Chicago.
There's always fucking traffic,
especially in that area.
And which I just wanted to like say, like,
we took an Uber.
Yeah, I'm like, this is also something I've been working on at that point for a year, and you're worried about like an hour of traffic you dealt with.
Yeah.
Like, so like, it was just such an eye-opening experience that like people like yourself showed up, had fun, and like all the people that came into making it happen. And that's what I think I love about like theater is, you can write something and like bring it together and then like enjoy it with a crowd, talk to the crowd afterwards. Whereas like you can
something I never really thought about.
Yeah, you can like post something. Like I made a lot of YouTube content. You can post something and like hopefully people watch it, unless they bring it up. It can kind of just go into the ether and you don't really know people's true thoughts on it. But like, you hear the laughs, you see the reactions, you talk to people straight after the show and it's fresh in their head. And like, it was an eye-opening experience. That's why like pretty much ever since I've been heavily involved in like live things. I did another theater show, and then I produced a lot of comedy shows, just because of that live aspect of, getting to interact with people before, during, and after whatever the thing is.
Yeah, I never did make it to your second show. I was super bummed about that.
Well, clips of that are also available on Entertainment Buffet's YouTube. That one was a more different show where we did like 4 short plays instead of one long one. But yeah, it's just had a big experience for me overall. So like I said, I appreciate you just for coming. I'm so glad that you guys had fun, because I'm sure there are people that went and weren't a huge fan of it, because it's not it's not for everyone, and that's fine, but like, I liked pushing the envelope on some things, because I think when people first heard the premise, so when you say like and I don't know the exact words of my like log line / elevator pitch, but the exact premise of the show is a group of patients show up to the therapist's office and they want to have a party, like it's their last night on Earth, because they do want it to be their last night on Earth, and in the morning they want to kill themselves. And the therapist says like, whoa, let's all have one more session, one-on-one, and I can see if I can like basically talk you out of this. And so the play has the format of hopping between ensemble scenes with the quote unquote suicide party and then the one-on-one sessions with the therapist.
Yeah, which I love that format. And like the log line is what kind of pulled me into it, because I didn't really know much about it. Like when you invited me to it, you're just kind of like, hey, we're doing this show. Here's kind of what it is. I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome. Like I definitely want to see that. And you know, that's exactly my kind of humor. So I'm into that sort of thing. So it immediately caught my attention, but I can definitely see how some people may not be interested. But I think people kind of reading what it's going to be about and walking in, like, I feel like you probably didn't have a lot of people who were just like, ugh, at this show.
Well, like I think one of the late shows, I think someone left at intermission, but I think that's because they were just tired and they probably realized the show was longer than they thought.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't actively see anyone with like a disgust look, but like I'm sure there were some people that weren't a huge fan of it, which is fine, like I said. But yeah, whenever I would tell people the premise, they would hear, you know, suicide and therapy and so forth, Last Night on Earth and like all those kind of things. And you're like, this is a comedy, you know, dark comedy, you know, it's not like a dramatic, you know, piece with tons of crying and, you know, whatever. It's like, no, this is a dark comedy. Like it'll get dramatic. And like things will happen, but like it's hopefully gonna make you laugh.
Yeah, and those are all the things that pulled me in. Like you said, when you read what it's about and you're like, comedy, huh? Like I need to see how this gets pulled off. And it, you know, it reminds me. So like one of my favorite TV shows of all time is Scrubs, which is a very silly show. Mm-hmm. But when they flip that switch and do the drama, they do it just as well as any other drama on television. And like that's the kind of stuff I love. Like I said before, I loved the format, and like Jerry is my favorite character, and it's because watching him interact with these people in the sessions. Like I love all the group scenes where everybody's crazy, but then when they're sitting there talking and they just get down into the serious stuff, and the show kind of tries to convince you, and I think it's really successful at this, that it tries to convince you like, oh, I totally understand why this person wants to kill themselves.
Yeah. So, in a weird way, well, I shouldn't say a weird way, but why that format, once it like that clicked, it helped write itself, because I came up with the premise of like a suicide party, and then I eventually like moved my way into like what kind of characters do I want to tell, and then I realized it was like, okay, so I want this to be like an ensemble piece. And I was like, I should really start with, and this is obviously a very, not something that, I'll just say it first without prefacing. I need to work on that. Basically, the what I looked into to help come up with characters was, what are all the reasons someone would want to kill themselves? And like, obviously it's like depression, anxiety, And so I worked my way, and that is what happened with all the characters, which is like, you know, we said Chloe just wanted to feel something, and her depression was so high. Like she just wasn't feeling happy, wanted to feel something, and figured like death, you know, whatever, maybe I'll feel something. And like another character was dying of cancer and was like, well, I don't want to, and he was old. He was an older character and was like, I don't want to be like some vegetable or that
he wanted to go out on his own terms.
Yeah, I didn't want people to wipe my ass. And you know, another was like hiding a big secret, and like was worried about how like her family would react to it. And then another was like betrayed like their sister. She caught her sister sleeping with her husband, so it was like an ultimate betrayal. And so like that's where I use that dynamic of like, why would you want to kill themselves? And that kind of helped me formulate the different characters, and then eventually like learning their personalities and like what kind of role they would play in the show. And then by having this dynamic of hopping between group scenes and one-on-one scenes, is because like I said, I love heavy dialogue, and a lot of times I love just like two-person scenes, depending on what the subject matter of the scene between the character is and what their relationship is. Yeah. But I realized I was like, well, the group scenes can be the comedy because it's ensemble. There's more personalities clashing, or like who's friends with who, because all the patients know each other, and like there's a lot of, and also because the whole idea was what's a suicide party look like, and I was like, well, what would you want to do on your last night on Earth? And a lot of people would probably want to do all the best quote unquote things or crazy things like drugs and drinking and dance and or sex or whatever, laugh, and that's where my mind went for that.
Yeah.
And but then the therapy sessions could be the drama side, and then there'd be comedy sprinkled into some of the sessions. But because the play would literally hop back and forth for the most part, that's where I was able to like, all right, here's some comedy over here, then here's some drama over here, and have that. And I know this is like an audio form, but if you could just picture, I always looked at this, people draw a line in the sand between comedy and drama. So picture one side. What I like to do, and what I think some of my favorite writers do, is like they stand by that line and they do the whole thing like what little kids do, like by, say, like a border.
Dance over it.
Yeah, you jump on the one side, like it's comedy, it's drama, it's comedy. It's a little of both. It's in the middle, and so like that's what I want a lot of my work to be. But literally splitting the play into that dynamic allowed me it allowed the draft to just flow out of me, because it's like, all right, I came up with the characters. I came up with like a rough description of characters, and then just started writing what the party scenes were like, and then what each one of their sessions were like. One thing that kind of changed was just like maybe the order of the therapy sessions. That's something that changed over drafts. And also, like, even in an early draft, I had an additional patient, but then I realized that they were just, I don't want to say dead weight, but someone proposed in a group reading. They're like, yeah, this character is just, what would you feel like if you got rid of a character? And I was like, probably this one. And then everyone was like, yeah, if you're going to get rid of one, that's the one.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, I'll write a draft where they're out of it and see how it feels. And it's like, oh, it doesn't feel like he's missing. So that's where it's like the dynamic of the session and then the party scenes was always the same. It was just maybe like the order of things. And then also, spoiler alert, like who and how many people would die.
Yeah.
That wildly changed between drafts.
Which I do love. So you said earlier that Clue and In Bruges were two movies you kind of compare the tone to. And I think that's perfect. Like, as soon as you said that, that was definitely like a light switch flipping. Like, oh, that's exactly what I feel. Because I love how all of their deaths are kind of on accident. Like, they're all here at a suicide party, but nobody actually dies on purpose except maybe like one or two people.
Yeah. We'll get into spoilers here. Out of all the patients, only 2 actually die from suicide, and the others that die are from accidents. And the reason I wanted to do that too is, and the first one that kind of like happened was Naya, the character Naya, a painting fall and like hit her head. Cause like I first thought of, there's a moment in there where like they were all like, oh, we should do drugs. And I'm like, these are a group of people I picture that only 1 or 2 of them have actually done drugs. And everyone else is just like, yeah, let's try cocaine,
Yeah.
And like, she was a character that was a typical like housewife mom. And she's like, I never got to dabble in the cocaines, and she's like, and she snorts it. And then I always like, I've seen it in some things where it's like all of a sudden, like a person just like falls over and and I shouldn't say it's comedic, but it's comedic in the sense that everyone's like, oh my God. And then they like pop up and it's like, oh God, you're not actually dead, And so then it was like, well, what if I do that? And then all of a sudden I'm like, well, this is ridiculous, but I kind of like that farce humor. And so farcical farce. I like that humor. And so then it kind of just flowed that like, oh well, the old person who has cancer should die of a heart attack, like like because something startled them, because it's a suicide party, weird crazy shit's happening, and then like there's a gun, and like you introduced a gun, Chekhov's rule, you can't just introduce a gun and not use it. So like I was like, well, it should accidentally go off and accidentally hit someone. And then that's where eventually it led to the most ridiculous death, which was someone running to the window to jump out of it, but slips on a banana peel and hits her head and dies. And that is like this show.
I love how they're like slapsticky.
Yeah, it's very slapstick sometimes. And what I love about this show is I love callbacks. Both in real life, just like personally with people. Like I love if say someone mentioned, like you and I mentioned a joke, and I love waiting just long enough to where I feel that you forgot it, and then bring it back up and get them with that moment where like, I love that surprise. So I tried to litter the show with not only callbacks, but also just like repeated jokes, because I love that. And so I was like, well, I can't be the only person that loves this kind of humor, because obviously I got that from somewhere. And so like I realized that it was like probably like a 45-minute setup for a joke, which is in the first act, Chloe is eating a banana, talking with someone in a conversation, and it's like just she's eating, whatever. It's not like I don't really call attention to it. And then when that character slips at the very end of the play, and then the person and I have to say the actor Sal who played Jerry,
he's so good.
Very underrated in the show because everyone loves Rusty, but I'm like, well, Rusty has all the jokes, whereas like Jerry has to interact with everyone's different personalities over the course of the show, but also is going through a dramatic arc of his own. And also
like I understand why everybody loves Rusty, but Jerry's the one that stands out for me.
Well, thank you. He's one that's very hard, but also I to this day I still feel like I could work on. But he is also getting drunk throughout the show, and so it's a progressive thing that performance has to do. But like the moment where he picks it up to reveal that the reason that she slipped is like she slipped on a banana peel, and he just says it perfectly, because he's like, are
you serious?
Yeah, and it really is like an are you serious moment. But also like the reason why I wanted a lot of deaths to not actually be suicide, but just random different ways, is because that's what life is. And like, especially if you ever see the show 6 Feet Under, which I haven't seen all of it, but I love the gimmick.
Fantastic show.
So I loved the gimmick for the 1 or 2 seasons I watched, which is like every episode starts with someone dying, and then that's the person who like they're going to do their funeral for that episode.
And the show maintains that throughout the whole thing. Yeah,
and like someone had the thing where it's like they were walking down the street, and then a construction worker knocks over his lunch pail, and the lunch pail hits a guy and kills him.
And as the show gets on, they would get goofier. Like the one that always stuck with me is a woman just gets hit with a golf ball at like a driving range type situation.
Yeah, but like that happens every day all over the world. And so like I was like, I can try to find ones that are funny, but also random, because like that's the thing. And then just a little Easter egg that I did for the people who either watch the show or maybe you'll watch it again, is the first scene. So the first scene is actually Jerry at his therapist's, but then like the first real scene where everyone shows up, every character that dies says how they're going to die in that first scene.
Oh shit, really?
In some way phrasing, like for example, the Mel Old character, he goes like, because I kept doing this weird gimmick thing where people were throwing things out the window. There's a
lot of good running gags in this, and that's one of them.
Yeah, where people are throwing things out a window, and then like the next character would show up and be like, "This thing almost hit me flying out the window," and
almost gave me a heart attack, doesn't he? Say,
he said almost gave me a heart attack, and someone's like, "Oh, you could have hit someone in the head and killed them," literally, if you watch that scene over,
shit, that's gonna make me go back and rewatch that.
Well, thank you, but like, and that was something I put later when I finally solidified on their deaths, because I hoped that if you go back and watch the show, if you listen to like the sessions and like watch the certain characters, you'll kind of see their various arcs. And obviously some have more than others. But yeah, that first scene, I thought it was fun. They just, because also we offhandedly say things like that, and
Yeah.
we offhandedly, it's weird. We don't like talking about suicide or therapy or depression, but we do say like, oh, I don't want to go to this meeting. I'm going to kill myself.
Yeah.
We have that nonchalantery way of saying suicide, but yet we won't talk about it. And so like I decided to just throw that in where everyone kind of says that in a various way or form, and then that ends up being how they're going to die later.
That totally passed me by, even on the second viewing. I'm gonna have to go rewatch that scene.
Yeah, but also because I realized when I thought of that idea, it's not just like something fun for me behind the scenes, and if you notice it, you notice it, but because like that's all how we talk.
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
Say,
I've said things like that for sure.
The same thing. I was just like, almost gave me a heart attack.
Yeah. I can either go to this Applebee's or suicide.
Exactly. Or you can go to the Applebee's for suicide.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah. So like that was just something that kind of developed, and so that humor with like slapsticky, but also serious, but also not nonchalant things, running gags. I just really tried to put like when you're going like draft to draft and stuff, and I'm sure you or other writers like experience it's like you have ideas that you're like, all right, that's an idea I know I'm keeping, but then others, I need to cut this, I need to remove this, I need to beef this up, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I like that. You kind of have those moments. And that's just what happened, is it just build it over time. And then also luckily my amazing director like helped. So I don't put a lot of like physical direction of what the characters should be doing, because I also wanted to give that to the director to have the freedom. Is like, so she understood when I would say like, I want this person to walk here or do this thing or do this to set up a gag for that, whatever it may be. But there's a lot of where I don't say whether they're sitting, they're standing, whatever. And like
I have the script pulled up as we're talking, and just scrolling through it, I have seen amongst like 7 pages, maybe like 3 lines of action, and then there's just dialogue.
Yeah, well, especially in the sessions, which I think were probably harder on the actors, because it's like it's a lot of theater and even movies. It's like you want things moving because you don't want people to be bored or get distracted or like fade into thinking about something else. And so Nora did a great job of keeping the action lively, but then also the cast finding moments that would be comedic and such. Because some were planned and then some were just like, I'll never forget like one rehearsal. There was this moment where basically someone early in the show dies, and then they try to hide it, and then someone else finds that body and is angry. And so there's a moment where like they found the body, and then the other 3 characters kind of look away and walk away, almost like when you're in trouble and you just kind of like look away, like, oh, I don't want to face this.
Yeah.
And so there was this moment where all 3 actors like spun away and did that. And like Nora said, like, I didn't direct them to do that. That was just like an actor's choice that all naturally did. But then, both me and her said like, yes, keep that,
Yeah. No,
you find those moments, that just make sense. And that's where, like I said, that's why I having actors and a director with experience, because in theater, I didn't have any.
I have to ask, where the running joke with the carpet?
So it's so funny because my mom was like, are you making fun of me? So I grew up with, for lack of a better term, kind of a clean freak mom, not necessarily OCD.
Yeah.
But like, so like, for example, there was one time in high school where my buddy came over and I was home alone and I had spilled like red Gatorade on my parents' carpet. And so my friend walked into the house right as I was running to the phone, because like 16-year-old me was like, call mom at work and ask her how to clean this so you don't fuck it up, right?
Yeah.
Because like I didn't know how to clean a stain properly. And so like I ran to the phone. He's like, what are you doing? I was like, I spilled Gatorade on the carpet. He's like, oh, you're dead. You know? Like even my friends knew like how my mom was, because it's like, you know, you grow up, you know, maybe not having the nicest of things. You get old enough and you get in a lucky enough position to have nicer things. You want to take care of them. It makes sense. I get it now being older, but at the time I've always found it funny when some people are such clean freaks and like, yes, I don't necessarily want stains on my carpet either, but I know that they happen. And like a lot of times I was like, well, that's where a beanbag chair goes now, you know? Or like, oh, well,
that's just water, it'll dry.
Oh, there's a water ring. Well, that's where a coaster goes now, you know, or a little doily, whatever the fuck. So that's where that kind of came from. And then the reason I liked it wasn't necessarily just for when I knew my mom would see the show and whatever, but like I know there's many people that have that, and I loved because Sal, who played Jerry, played it perfectly, which is everyone proceeds to say how much they love the carpet. Like all the patients love the carpet.
It's my favorite bit of the show.
Well, I'm glad
his like final line about like, what do you think of this carpet?
Well, yeah, because so that's the thing too about running jokes is if you don't like it like the second or third time, like I really hammer that one. It's one of the biggest reoccurring jokes in the thing. But because like also it brings out like the personality of like Rusty is like
who cares so much about the carpet for some reason.
Yeah, but not about his own well-being. But like he is just like, but this is nice and I like this and it should be like cherished, and like everyone's just like, oh, well, you're gonna ruin the carpet. And I think it was even something I realized later rewatching like episodes of Archer where like someone would drop something, it's like, well, now that's gonna attract ants.
Yeah, is that what you want? Do you want ants? Because that's how you get ants.
Yeah, so like I love. And here's the other thing too, and because other jokes like that happen, is from Jerry, the therapist's perspective, is he has all these patients show up that say they want to kill themselves. So that's like, you know, the highest of stakes. But their mind is worried about the carpet. Yeah. Or like, when Nia shows up, she's just like, how'd you people find parking? You know, I'm worried I'm going to get towed. But like, that's also how some people are. It's like, you could have all this shit happening, but then all of a sudden, like the mundane is what's really bothering you.
Yeah.
So that's why I kind of wanted to put that in there. And I knew that I knew that in the beginning, the carpet thing wouldn't be funny, but I'm like, well, if I just keep hammering at it, I think if it doesn't get you in the beginning, it eventually will just get you based on like, for fuck's sake, you know.
Yeah. I definitely enjoyed it in the moment, but like to me, I think the biggest laugh of the show is Jerry's final like, what do you think of this carpet? Everybody seems to love it, but I don't get it.
Oh yeah, I don't get the big up. Oh yeah, because he sees it all the time, whereas like his patients probably only see it once or twice. So, you know, and yeah, his therapist shows up at the very, very end. And yeah, when he asked that, because he's like drunk and just like all discombobulated.
Surrounded by bodies.
Yeah, which by the way, if you watch the recording, he had like some of my favorite deliveries, which is like, yeah, that line in particular. And I also, they started talking about something else. And she's like, what about, you know, the dead bodies? He's like, oh, shit. You know, like there was lines like that like I wrote and said like in my head, it should be delivered like this. And then when he, without my or Mary Nora's direction, but he just got it, that it's like, shit. You know, like just the timing of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's what really makes the comedy. Like you can come up with the funny thing, but if like the director and the actor aren't on the same page, it won't work. But like it's those were little moments that like, even if I wasn't sure if the crowd necessarily was going to get it, I'm like, I think that's funny, and like I can't be the only person in the world that thinks this is funny.
Oh no, that destroyed me. Even this time around, it was still great.
Well, and that's, you know, I love doing running gags, because running gags usually get me. And then even like that's what the window thing in the beginning was a running gag. But then I wanted to have, like, for example, like they keep joking about throwing things out the window, and there's something funny about just like throwing it out the window and like not giving a care in the world like where it goes. And also because we're on a stage, like we don't see where that goes, it's just like into the abyss. And like to me, what I love doing about that is at the very, very end of the play when Jerry has this big monologue and he says, like, I, before you all showed up, was going to jump out that window. And then everything gets real and dark. And I'm like, yeah, remember that thing that you all like were laughing at? And that's the thing about life, though, is like things like that can be funny, but then in a different context with a window could be the worst thing in the world.
God, the fucking ending is just so good. I also love how he just immediately tries to pass the buck on to his therapist. I'm like, well, you know, you're my therapist, so this kind of goes on you too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, and so that's one thing that was hard was, you know, I didn't want Jerry to just be a, you know, a device for the other characters. I wanted him to be the main character, and like he's the one that lives at the end, and I wanted him to have a lesson, and that lesson being that like and it's a monologue that I really wanted it to be a big thing, but we had to, you know, make it reasonable. But like it's like he realizes like death could like life can be random and weird, and you don't know when it's coming, and like with death and like this he goes on this huge thing. It's like, but then like life is precious, we should enjoy it while we have it, because none of us really know, unless, you know, certain circumstances, when it's over. So yeah, but yeah, feel free, ask anything away, whether it's like whether it's plot things or like from the writing thing, because I as you can tell, love talking about it. It's so much fun to relive too.
Well, I think we're gonna start wrapping up here a little bit, but what is your biggest takeaway from this? I mean, 4 years later, you said you've done other shows, you've learned some lessons. Like, what is it, like, if you had to boil it down, like, what is the thing that you walked away from this experience with, aside from, we'll exclude the biggest thing of how it changed your life for the better?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you find like whatever, it's like a genre or like a type of thing that you like love, because some people love, you know, maybe writing like mysteries or sci-fi or whatever the thing is. I felt like dark comedy it is like my all-time favorite, like if we're gonna call it a genre or like a subgenre or whatever thing. And like I think I'm just so proud of how I was able to take an idea that everyone questioned the moment they heard it, and it's like, no, see, like it's something is clicking in my head, and I think it'll click with you too if you just like follow me on this journey. And like what's so weird is like, obviously with the heavy subject matter, I was just, it meant the world to be able to have something that is very goofy and absurd and whatever else you want to call it, you know, like I said, farcical, all these goofy things. But then also I have a lot of things that I think in other pieces I didn't quite have, like lessons or themes or whatever. Like I maybe would just have an idea and I liked that thing, and I was like, no, I have like a goal with this thing, even though not everyone may see it, not everyone may know, but like it's like, no, I want to show people that like all these different things about therapy and the funny side, the dark side, the truth, the things we don't realize, or they, you know, flip contexts, and just all these things. I can't believe that like through like my writing, the direction of like Mary Nora, the actors and so forth, like I can't believe that like we were able to kind of pull this off in a way. And like I said, it's not going to be everyone's favorite piece, but I think for what I was going for, both with that story and the performances that happened is like, we made it work, and I made something that I think makes so many various ideas and things that I've had. And also, like, there's a piece of me in all those characters. Like, I have certain characters say certain things that like I truly believe or have said or whatever it is. And like, I don't know. I think the biggest thing for me, obviously, besides the personal life changes, is just like, some works you chip away at them, and you just can't quite crack them. You can't quite figure them out. You maybe like some things, you hate other things, or you just drop something because you're like, you know what, I'm just not passionate about this anymore. But like, this was one that I just, once it clicked, I was like, I need to see this happen, because I'm like, I picture it. I literally picture this on a stage. I don't know what the stage looks like. I don't know what the cast looks like, but I just see it happening. And so to see it go from meme seeing title concept to the audience clapping at the end of the show is just, and all within almost exactly a year, is just wild. And I'm very excited about it, happy about it, and I just can't believe that this weird idea, we were all able to pull it off to where I'm like, yeah, I feel like I gave you what I was going for.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd say you knocked it out of the park, man. Like, I love the show. I actually wanted to go see it again, but just like the way my fucking work is so busy all the time, I wasn't able to get a second weekend where we could go. But like, it's great, and I hope everybody checks out the YouTube links and watches it. Like, I remember after I saw it, I was immediately like, hey, can you like send me the script to that? Just because like I do with plays, you don't really get to experience them again, and I wanted a way to experience it again. And even just reading the script, like reliving those jokes in my head.
Yeah, it's a story and a piece that, like, I don't know if someday it can be finagled into sort of like a feature style, like an indie feature, but like in play form, I would absolutely love to bring it alive again, whether it's like I give the script to someone to produce it, or like, I maybe am not involved as a producer, but I just give you the script and they can bring it to life, and then I can go watch it, you know?
Yeah.
That would be ideal. But yeah, like, it's something that if I never do it again, I'm very happy with experience, but I also just like, and I hope it just doesn't sound like egotistical that I'm like tooting my own horn, but like, I just love, like, there's still some of the actors that I became friends with and have communicated with afterwards, or like kind of people like yourself that bring it up if somehow it comes up. But like, it feels like it's luckily like an idea and a weird thing that just makes you think of it. And it doesn't, it hopefully is like unique and original enough to where it's something that sticks out in your mind. Because I think that's so hard with media, is you can just easily fall into the abyss and no one sees it, or people just forget of stuff. Like we're going to do an episode of our podcast coming up where it's like, we think that there's so many movies, for example, that are underrated, that it's like they were good and like liked, but then it's like, why aren't people still talking about this movie? You know?
Oh, yeah.
And so like, I hope that like for those who get to interact with it, they, you know, and had fun and enjoy it. And like, yeah, I really hope someday I can bring it onto some form of stage or see it on a stage again. I'm very glad that we got at least one recording of one of the shows. But yeah, I could see other actors dabble with this material. I could see another director try to see if they can bring something else out of it. But if not, I'm very happy and proud. And this is one thing, like, we were joking about it earlier. You know, I won't say that the piece is great, because that just seems self-indulgent, but like, I think it's good. I think it's good enough.
I'll say it's great.
Thank you. But like, I think it's good. And I think one thing that helped some of the crowds, like especially people that knew me, is like I'd never done a play before. Like, oh God, Brandon's doing a play. It's an indie play. Like, I just hope this isn't garbage, And it's like, no, I like me and like a lot of people that read this put a lot of work into this so that it can be its most enjoyable and its most meaningful. And so I think that's why some people, when they see it, they're just like, oh, because you hear the premise and you're skeptical.
Yeah.
Whereas like some premises, you hear like a certain superhero movie, it's like, yeah, the premise is this. It's like, yeah, I'll probably like that. But like, you're like, yeah, it's these people that they're going to throw a suicide party and da, 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 da. It's like, what's happening?
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, I'm so glad we finally got to do this, because we've been talking about doing this for a while, and we were like, oh, a month after the show we'll do it, and here we are like 4 years later. Life gets busy sometimes, but I feel like we could go on for another like 3 hours. Maybe one day we'll do it in part 2 or something.
Yeah, I mean, I or like a comment, like I could talk about this. The show means a lot to me personally, and I had a lot of fun working on it, and just like it keep kind of like improving and growing in different areas, and then little things would happen, different evolutions of it. And I remember even like I was struggling. I'm glad you liked the ending, because I was really struggling with the last like 3 pages. It's like I knew to get to this moment, but then I didn't know what to happen with Jerry at the end when he's left with like all the chaos. And someone gave me the advice, come up with the most ridiculous ending you can think of, and then and then scale back. And so like one draft had a ridiculous ending where there was this whole thing where Rusty, to get people to stay, said he'd planted a bomb and had a detonator, and that was an excuse to get everyone to stay and get Jerry to stay. And then at the very end, he like finds like the detonator and like hits it, and then like basically he kills himself and just blows everything up. And because I was just like, oh, what's the most ridiculous thing? Oh, everything blows up. And then we had actually done a live reading in front of a small audience to get like feedback, and I think it seeing people read it and react to it, it just didn't work. And like luckily we were able to find like what the ending was. So I'm glad you liked it, because it was something that was one of the harder aspects of like finalizing this script, was like, after all, we bring it all these weird places, how do we just end it, like, because I put a lot of self-pressure on endings, because like I've seen like, have you seen No Country for Old Men?
I have.
So like I personally, and I get the context of the ending and why it goes this way and yada, yada, yada. It doesn't mean I have to like it. I think that that's a movie that as I was watching it, I'm like, man, like it felt like a B+, A-. And then to me, the ending drove it down to like a B-, C+. You know what I mean? Like it it gave me a sour taste in my mouth. And so if you're a writer, that's one thing that make sure, if you can, come up with an ending in the beginning, save yourself some time and then work your way backwards or something, because endings are hard.
Yeah.
Just like titles.
Oh God, for real. But you stuck the landing, sir, in my opinion.
Thank you. I appreciate you watching it again too.
Yeah, no problem. And I hope everyone will check out the links. We'll have those in the show notes. But do you have anything you need to promote before we hop on out of here?
Sure. Well, yeah, the links that leads to my production company, Entertainment Buffet, where you can catch that play, and like I've tons of other content on there. You can find, you can listen to some episodes of Shelved on there.
Yeah, we are there as well.
And other podcasts, the Entertainment Buffet podcast. If you don't want to be on YouTube and you want to listen to something like this, check out Entertainment Buffet podcast. It's one that I co-host, and we are actually, at the time of this recording, we're about to cross our 100th episode.
Oh, great! Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's a fun show. Definitely recommend checking out. A lot of fun movie topics and different stuff from week to week. So it's a fun little listen.
Appreciate that. So Yeah, I'm glad you got to see it like 4 years ago in person, but then see what it looks like in video form, because some people have only seen it in this YouTube video form.
Yeah, I mean, it was like my first play that I actually seeked out on my own, and I had a blast. And that little space too. I was like, oh, I would totally come here again.
Yeah, and I say, like, obviously we're in the pandemic right now. It's a little hard to see live stuff, but if you can, go see theater at small uh venues, and don't just go to like the big whatever, because I feel like, and this is maybe just my personal opinion, but like if you see, like, say Romeo and Juliet or whatever it is, like something you've heard of or seen a million times, like whatever, but like there's a lot of like fun original work. Believe me, I've seen some stinkers, I've seen I've seen some original shows that I'm like, I didn't actually like that.
Yeah.
But
you're gonna get some weird and more original stuff.
But yeah, it's gonna happen. You're gonna see some bad stuff, but you can also see some really fun stuff. I mean, like seeing one original kind of farce and then eventually getting the idea, it inspired me to write my own and make my own, and in many ways change my life. It may not happen to you, but like it could have an effect on you. So I say when it's safe to do so, go support like live entertainment, but also original small venues, because like those venues can use it a lot more than like the Chicago Theater can.
Yeah, especially now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and also check out Entertainment Buffet while you're at it.
Yeah.
But all right. I had a lot of fun talking about this, man, and I'm glad we could finally do this.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, I could tell you stories, things that happened at other showings and behind the scenes. Some of the actors were our third choice.
Yeah, I think there
hopefully
may be
they don't hear
two.
I said that.
I think there may be a part 2 in the future.
Absolutely.
All right, but thank you for being here, and I want to thank everybody for listening. And we're gonna get out of here.
All right. Thanks again.
All right, thank you.